Good morning from Nassau, Bahamas. This is Melissa Kay, and this is Providence Journal. And today we're standing near the intersection of Augusta and Delancey streets. What we call this is the old quarter of Nassau. And the reason that I'm filming this Providence Journal is for particularly students who are interested in deepening their knowledge of Bahamian history with right now this series with New Providence, Nassau in particular. The reason why I decided to do this particular series of Providence Journal was because when I did some studies on Nassau, I learned things that I had never known, and I've been here all my life, and my family has been in the Bahamas for centuries. And I just thought it would be very helpful for kids in the Bahamas, in particular at University of the Bahamas, and not limited to that, to be able to know where to look for some really interesting studies on Nassau if you are interested. One thing that I found to be very exciting about this area was that the West Hill Street was really what I believe to be city center above Nassau Harbor. And the reason that Nassau Harbor is so interesting, the more that I study it, the reason that I found Nassau to be so interesting was because of the harbor. Around 1666, it is learned from different textbooks that the Bermudian settlers had come here because their particular island was so exposed in the Atlantic. They found this island, named at the time Sales Island, later to be called Providence, later to be called New Providence, and we Bahamians call it Nassau. They came here and they found that they could grow their gardens and raise fruit, cultivate herbs, and have a better living because Nassau is sheltered. Prior to that, because the Eleutheran adventurers had shipwrecked over on Eleuthera in 1648, Eleuthera was a lot of the center of what we can call it white written history culture, but it's still a part of our history that we can't overlook because prior to that, we had batches and batches and batches of pirates in Nassau here. They were running this place, and that's why you find the curvy, squiggly roads just built helter-skelter along the hills and dales of New Providence. Another thing that I learned that I found to be interesting was that the topographical survey of New Providence shows you in the very early days before what we call overdevelopment. We Nassauvians call it overdevelopment because a lot of us don't support the raising of hills for gravel, but we have to use it for building. But if you look at the early topographical surveys, you are going to see that ridges ran around the circumference of this island, New Providence, which is 21 by 7. Those ridges protected the island from the sea gale blast of salt that could actually damage your crops. So what I want to point out to anybody looking at this particular study today is to say that let's look at Nassau Harbor and let's look at its protection. I would also like to point out that in 1670, it apparently came to the attention of a lot of the Eleutheran adventurers that the Bermudian settlers were coming here and having a better time. Better time means no scurvy, no disease, no starvation, no malnutrition, no losing all your crops you planted in November or October. That's the Bahamian season. In the Bahamas, we tend to have a 2-month season. It's not like the winter climates where you have summer, winter, spring, fall. In the Bahamas, you tend to have 2 seasons, 6 months of miserable heat and 6 months of gorgeous, 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 cool, temperate weather. That is why the Bahamas was called the Isles of June, because when you came here as a luxury tourist, you could lay your hip on the beach if it was hot, you wasn't working and sweating, you were in the water. And if you were coming from the northern climes, you could cool up on these ridgy hills, drink your drinks, eat your healthy Bahamian food, and go back home without minus negative tuberculosis, negative pneumonia. A lot of the people who came here, in particular this West Hill region, I am not on West Hill, but I'm near West Hill. This is the ridge. At another time, God willing, we will actually see the harbor. But I'm just trying to show you the pretty little street of Nassau And they used to say in those days, Nassau is as pretty as a flower. I decided, rather than just speak to you about what I love about Nassau and this area all my life, I decided for the students of Bahamian history to direct you to a couple textbooks. One of the textbooks I read as a child in school, but I'm rediscovering it now, is The Story of the Bahamas by Paul Aubrey. This book, the acknowledgments in the introduction was written by Sir Lyndon Pindling. He appreciated the work that Paul Aubrey did. When I looked at the book as an adult, I saw that Paul Aubrey had married a girl, a lady, young maiden, who had worked for none other than then the Duke of Windsor, abdicated king, down here away from his duties, living the life in Nassau, living the life. It is because of that that I have personally found Paul Aubrey's work to be just a little bit more juicy, because I know he was privy to a lot of wonderful documents, information, et al. That is not always easy to get when you're doing research in the Bahamas. So that's the first book, The Story of the Bahamas. I would also like to recommend another book, a little known to many, but known well to some, called The Paradise Island Story, also by Paul Aubrey. That is a beautiful work on the history of what was then known as Hog Island. I would also like to recommend for people who want to get into the really, really intricate studies of the Black Bahamian history and the interweaving of storylines of numerous groups of people in New Providence, but not limited to Nassau or New Providence. Michael Craton and Gail Saunders' works, Islanders in the Streams, Volumes 1 and 2. I found some of the stories, the intricate storytelling, the historical references, and the footnotes to be of invaluable research quality. If you are someone who loves to study history, please look at those 4 books that I've recommended for Nassau. I would also like to reiterate that the importance of the Nassau Harbor was because the Northeast Providence Channel runs along here, and that is what we call deep water, deep sea. Cruise ships, boats, anybody can get into this harbor safely almost any time of year. Every blue moon, it's too rough to get in, but for the most part, you can get in the harbor. And what's beautiful about Nassau Harbor is it has 2 entrances. The east side, you have to know the reefs. And that's what made it very exciting for the pirates. They could outwit anybody running after them, get in and out of this place. They knew the reefs. Anybody who was coming here for the first time or wasn't familiar, lots of them perished on the reefs. And that's another story for another day, because that gets us into the wrecking industry. The Bahamians used to call it rocking. In wrapping up this Providence Journal today, I would like to say that I am highly recommending, if you visiting Nassau, please visit the following in this area. They are all wonderful sites. 1, Buena Vista John Watling's Distillery. The Buena Vista and John Watling's Distillery is a beautiful historical site. That particular estate takes you back 200 years of Bahamian history. And at the time of the late 1800s, early 1900s, that was phone number 2. And the government house, which was temporarily in this area, was phone number 1. Government house was subsequently built and permanently stands there on the other side of this ridge up on Blue Hill Road. So I'm also recommending Arlene Nash's Junkanoo School on the corner there. And I'm recommending the National Art Gallery of the Bahamas and the Fiona Theater and all of the Great Cliff property running straight over to Government House. And that wraps us up for today. Thank you for joining me, Melissa K, Nassau, Bahamas. Healthy and whole, and namaste.